This week on Jon Thelen's Destination Fish, we start on an early ice crappie bite, exposing tips and tricks to catch more finicky crappies throughout the day. Jon Thelen's Destination Fish is brought to you by Lindy Fishing Tackle and L&M Fleet Supply. Ooh, I think he might do it. He did it, yep. I watched this fish come from a long ways away. And you know, he just wasn't coming hard. So I just didn't think that there was any chance he was gonna get really aggressive. But as soon as he got in here, he saw this bait and he decided, okay, well, and there was just a little dart up on that mega live. Look at that. Great crappie to start our evening, eater size fish. Fishing pretty deep water today, so you know what? We're gonna keep the fish we catch, because when it comes down to it, most of these fish aren't gonna make it if we let them go, but it's a great 10-inch fish to start our day. Hey, here's what we're gonna talk about today. We're gonna talk about catching crappies when they're kind of finicky, okay? It's cold out today. There's a lot of cold air that has swept in, and that fish right there, he was a great example of a fish moving really, really slow because of the conditions around him. Okay, so ultimately, it's gonna be about adjustments today. It's that kind of day, and I've already had to make some. And we're gonna talk about those adjustments as we go forward with the show today. Because I'll tell you what, it's those adjustments, those little things that can make such a huge difference. And if you make them, you're gonna be on the full side at the end of the day. Ooh, there, I got another one biting this one. There he is, got him. There's a couple of them together there. This one feels like a pretty good crop. See him coming up, he's a pretty good fish. That was two of them came in here together. When you get two of them in here together like that, man, I'll tell you what, sooner or later, you're gonna get one of them to bite. And I actually got them both to bite. That one there, dynamite fish, perfect fish. That is exactly what we're hunting. But I'll tell you what, these fish, they come in these packs, and one of the things that's so important, I'm gonna get right back down because there's more of them there, and then I'll show you this fish while this is dropping back down, if I can get it. Look at that, that's just awesome. But one of the keys is having baits at different levels in the water column. But one of the things I always do is I set my dead stick deeper than my jigging rod. And that's very deliberate, because a lot of times those fish that aren't just aggressive enough yet to come rushing up and hit that rod that you're jigging with, a lot of times they'll be willing to just poke their nose off the bottom and grab that dead stick setup. But I can also have a bait down there at a point where the fish that aren't quite as aggressive can just poke their nose up and grab it. And that's why you want to fish a couple different levels in the water column. It'll make a huge difference for you. There he is, got him. Both rods, he was right on top of both of them, and I knew he was going to hit one of them, and I think he actually bumped that other one before I got him on the one I got him on. This is a really good one. Yeah, another good one. Look at that. Perfect fish. Look at that. Dynamite crappie. A couple of things on bait selection though. One of the things that I think is just hugely important is understanding having different options down there for these fish. Because you never know when a fish comes in. This fish might have a totally different aggression level than the last fish that came in. This fish here, he bumped that tungsten toad, but he ended up eating that quiver spoon. So here's what I do. When I look at that dead stick, I'm always fishing something there that is easy to be very, very subtle with. This tungsten toad right here, this is a really simple deal. I'm using the size 10 today, but it's a great scenario for a presentation that is just gonna pretty well sit there. And I'm using that one on my tuned up custom noodle. One more thing I'll show you. This is that quiver spoon, 16th ounce quiver spoon. It's a Glow Wonder Bread. But if I were in a scenario where I was not seeing fish, if fish just weren't around, that's when I would go to a Rattling Flyer spoon. And I'll tell you why. This is the really, really aggressive side of the spectrum. The idea behind that would be to call fish into me. Now today, I'm not really having to call fish into me. They're just meandering through. And as long as they're meandering through like this, I'm gonna stay with that really subtle presentation in the tungsten toad and kind of that medium place that I'm in with that quiver spoon. Jon Thelen's Destination Fish is brought to you by these fine sponsors. Here we go. He's going to hit it now. There he is. I knew this fish was going to hit it at that point. And I'll tell you what it was. I just kept coming up. And at a certain point, I always say there's a ceiling with crappies where they're just not going to go any higher. And we were getting that ceiling. Really nice fish. Look at that fish. We were getting to that ceiling and you could see him just getting a little bit more aggressive. And I'll tell you, that's one of the coolest things about using these Humminbird Mega Live units is you can see their aggression level. But I'm going to tell you, if you don't have one of these live units, it's not the end of the world either, and I'll tell you why. You can see that on 2D sonar as well. So if you're using a Helix 7 or a Helix 5, you're still going to see that aggression level. And what happened is he came up slow, slow, slow. And when we got to what I thought was pretty close to the ceiling, because I've had a couple come up that wouldn't come any higher, that fish right there, I just jiggled it a couple times right at that ceiling and he darted up and smacked it. So one of the things you want to pay attention to is as you're working with fish, various fish, whether you catch them or not, learn something from them. And what that is, number one, is figure out what their ceiling is. Because once you know where that ceiling is, you can stop right at that point and you can just bang it around. And usually if you've got them up that high, they do want to eat. But ultimately you might have to do something right when you get to that ceiling. So one of the things I do is I pay a lot of attention to every fish that I don't catch. When I'm bringing them up, if those doggone fish hit a point where they won't come up any higher and then they just leave on me, that's when I know that's where it is. Tonight, that's about 8 feet off the bottom. If I go much more than 8 feet off the bottom, man, I'll tell you what, these fish just seem to lose interest on me. So that's kind of that spot now that I'm targeting and saying, okay, if I get them 8 feet up at that point now we're just gonna have to work them right in that area because that's pretty much their ceiling. I'm gonna lose them if I keep coming up 10, 12, 13, 14 feet above bottom. So keep that in mind. Pay attention to every single fish that you don't catch because it can make a big difference what you learn from that fish on the next couple that come in. It's early winter and the lack of snow cover makes the crappies even more spooky. We're set up in 32 feet of water off the deep edge of a shoreline weed bed. It's sunny and cold with temps in the low 20s. We're using a variety of lures, including 1/16 ounce Lindy quiver spoons in Wonderbread and Fire Tiger on our active rods, and a number 10 red glow tungsten toad on the dead stick. Today's rod choices are a tuned up custom fusion in hand and a tuned up custom precision noodle for a dead stick. Another little tip I'll give you. When you're baiting up something small like this tungsten toad, what I always do is I go multiples. I always go with more than just one spike or one waxworm. On this one, I've actually got 3. I've got a red spike and then I've got 2 waxworms. But if you notice, what I do is I hook one of the waxworms through the end, okay, the nose or the tail. But then the other one, I go right through the center of the body so that when this is down there, it's dancing in a lot of different directions. There's little pieces going in a lot of different directions, and that can make a difference in getting their attention and getting them to bite. Plus, the second thing I'll tell you is if you put just one on there, a lot of times, this really happens a lot with bluegills, but it happens with crappies too. A lot of times what happens is they pick that one off and then they lose interest and they're gone. Where if you put multiple baits on there, multiple pieces of waxworm, spike, whatever, they might tear one off, but they're still there, or their buddies are still there looking at it, trying to get their turn. So that's why I always go with multiples. It'll make a big difference in just keeping fish around and keeping them interested in your bait. There he is, got him. Oh, he must have picked that up, and I didn't even really notice that he had picked it up. This is a good fish. I think this fish swam up with it, and I didn't even, kind of lost track of what was happening there. It was strange. All of a sudden, I set it back down, and the rod just basically took off, And I think that's a case of this fish was swimming up. Yep, good crappie. Look at that. Great fish. Look at that. Man, I'll tell you, what a day. What a fun day. This is some of the funnest fishing. I just love it. It's just good fun stuff. Get out and do some of this. But man, I'll tell you, most importantly, when you're out here doing this, make sure you're making those subtle adjustments, little things. A couple different styles of bait, different jigging cadences, different spots in the water column. And I'm gonna tell you, it'll make a huge difference for you, and you'll have a pail just like that one at the end of the day. That's a lot of fun. Jon Thelen's Destination Fish has been brought to you by these great sponsors.